Chapter 11. The Lady or the Tiger. In the olden times, there lived a semi-barbaric king with an authority so irresistible that, at his will, he turned his fancies into facts. When he decided upon anything, the thing was done. One of his fancies was to use the public arena as an agent of poetic justice. For this purpose, the king built a vast amphitheatre with encircling galleries, mysterious vaults, and unseen passages. Here crime was punished or virtue rewarded by the decrees of an impartial and incorruptible chance. When a subject was accused of a crime of sufficient importance to interest the king, public notice was given that on an appointed day the fate of the accused person would be decided in the king's arena. When the people had assembled in the galleries, the king, surrounded by his court, took his seat high upon one side of the arena. At his signal, a door beneath him opened, and the accused subject stepped out into the amphitheatre. Directly opposite him, on the other side of the enclosed space, were two doors, exactly alike and side by side. It was the duty and the privilege of the person on trial to open one of the doors. He could open either door he pleases, subject to no guidance or influence. If he opened the one, there came out of it a hungry tiger, the fiercest and most cruel that could be procured, which immediately sprang upon him and tore him to pieces as a punishment for his guilt. But if the accused person opened the other door, there came forth from it a lady, the most suitable to his years and station that His Majesty could select among his fair subjects, and to this lady he was immediately married, as a reward of his innocence, whether he liked it or not. This was the king's semi-barbaric method of administering justice. Its perfect fairness is obvious. The criminal opened either door he pleased, without having the slightest idea whether, in the next instant, he was to be devoured or married. On some occasions, the tiger came out of one door, and on some out of the other. The decisions of this tribunal were not only fair, but also immediately effected. The accused person was instantly punished if he found himself guilty, and if innocent, he was rewarded on the spot. There was no escape from the judgments of the king's arena. The institution was a very popular one. When the people gathered together on one of the great trial days, they never knew whether they were to witness a bloody slaughter or a hilarious wedding. Thus, the masses were entertained and pleased, and the thinking part of the community could bring no charge of unfairness against this plan. For did not the accused person have the whole matter in his own hands? The semi-barbaric king had a daughter with a soul as imperious as his own. As is usual in such cases, she was the apple of his eye, and was loved by him above all. Among his courtiers was a young man of fine blood but low rank, who was in love with a princess. The royal maiden was well satisfied with her lover, for he was handsome and brave. This love affair moved on happily for many months, until one day the king happened to discover his existence. He did not hesitate to do his duty. The youth was immediately cast into prison, and a day was appointed for his trial in the king's arena. This, of course, was a special important occasion, and His Majesty, as well as all the people, was greatly interested in the workings and development of this trial. The young man and the princess loved each other, but the king would not allow any fact of this kind to interfere with the workings of the tribunal, in which he took such great delight and satisfaction. No matter how the affair turned out, the youth would be disposed of, and the course of events would determine whether or not the young man had done wrong in allowing himself to love the princess. The appointed day arrived. From far and near, the people gathered and thronged the great galleries of the arena. The king and his court took their places opposite the twin doors. All was ready. The signal was given. A door opened, and the lover of the princess walked into the arena. Tall, beautiful, fair, His appearance was greeted with a low hum of admiration and anxiety. Half the audience had not seen so handsome a youth. No wonder the princess loved him. What a terrible thing for him to be there! The youth advanced into the arena and turned, as the custom was, to bow to the king. His eyes fixed upon the princess, who sat to the right of her father. But for the barbarism in her nature, the princess could not bear to have been there. For days she had thought of nothing but this great event. With more power, influence and force of character than anyone who had ever before been interested in such a, she had possessed herself of the secret of the doors. She knew behind which of those stood the cage of the tiger with its open front, and in which waited the lady. And not only did she know in which room stood the lady ready to emerge, blushing and radiant, should her door be opened, but she knew who the lady was. It was one of the fairest and the loveliest maidens of the court, who had been selected as the reward of the accused youth. Should he be proved innocent of the crime of aspiring to one so far above him? And the princess hated her. Often had she seen or imagined that she had seen this fair creature throwing glances of admiration upon the person of her lover. And sometimes she thought these glances were returned. The girl was lovely, but she had dared to raise her eyes to the loved one of the princess. With all the intensity of the savage blood inherited from her barbaric ancestors, she hated the woman who trembled behind that silent door. When her lover turned and looked at her, and his eye met hers as she sat there, pale and white, he saw, by that power of perception which is given to those whose souls are one, that she knew behind which door crouched the tiger, and behind which stood the lady. He had expected her to know it. He understood her nature, that she would never rest until she had made plain to herself this thing, hidden to all onlookers, even to the king. Then it was that his quick and anxious glance asked the question, which? It was as plain to her as if he shouted it from where he stood. There was not an instant to be lost. The question was asked in a flash. It must be answered in another. Her right arm lay on the cushioned parapet before her. She raised her hand and made a slight, quick movement towards the right. No one but her lover saw her. Every eye but his was fixed on the man in the arena. He turned, and with a firm and rapid step, he walked across the empty space. Every heart stopped beating. Every breath was held. Every eye was fixed immovably upon that man. Without the slightest hesitation, he went to the door on the right and opened it. Now, the point of the story is this: did the tiger come out of that door, or did the lady? The more we reflect upon this question, the harder it is to answer. The decision of the question depended upon that hot-blooded, semi-barbaric princess. Her soul at a white heat beneath the combined fires of despair and jealousy. She had lost him, but who should have him? How often, in her waking hours and in her dreams, had she started in wild horror and covered her face with her hands as she thought of her lover opening the door on the other side of which waited the cruel fangs of the tiger. But how much oftener had she seen him at the other door? How she had gnashed her teeth and torn her hair when she saw his start of rapturous delight as he opened the door of the lady. How her soul had burned in agony when she had seen him lead her forth, his whole frame kindled with the joy of recovered life. And yet that awful tiger, those shrieks, that blood. Her decision had been indicated in an instant, but it had been made after days and nights of anguished deliberation. She had known she would be asked. She had decided what she would answer, and without the slightest hesitation, she had moved her hand to the right. The question of her decision is one not to be slightly considered, and so I leave it with all of you. Which came out of the open door, the lady or the tiger?